All right, ready or not, we are live. Welcome to the CBG Radio Podcast, brought to you by Consistency Breeds Growth, Nutrition Coaching. I am a random guy named Joel, but above me there is Justin, the WOD nutritionist. He is the founder and CEO of Consistency Breeds Growth. And then we also have with us the demure, the very mindful, the very cutesy Gab is with us. She is an awesome coach with CBG. I would know because she's been working with me for a while. So, so we launched a podcast. So here we are. So this is going to be awesome. It's going to be fun. So we'll just jump right into it then. And
Let's do it.
Here in the last few days, we set it to be, Justin versus Metfix, right? The Metfix launch came out, and Justin had some words for it, and you've kind of over the last a couple weeks have really there was an Instagram kind of back and forth with the CrossFit book, and now Andrew Hiller has jumped into the fray a little bit.
Shocking.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, exactly. But it was a very great discussion. I thought you guys had a great discussion. I was glad to see that he was willing to have you on live. And so just kind of explain a little bit of how that came together, or the last couple of days, how that's kind of transpired.
So there was a post by the CrossFit book about Metfix. Greg Glassman talking about nutrition, which is already something that I have an issue with because he's not a nutritionist. You could still know about nutrition, right? And not be a nutritionist, that's fine. But his approach always through the lens of CrossFit and now through the lens of Metfix have been demonizing particular food or food groups. And in this case, the very similar script as the CrossFit in 100 words is that I have an issue with is little fruit and no sugar, right?
Some fruit.
And so I commented on the post sarcastically, being who I am, like, Greg Glassman, like, can you be my nutrition coach, right? Knowing he's never worked with Gen Pop at all, like anybody, like one-on-one, like in a nutrition coaching setting. He's always just provided generalized recommendations for nutrition, right? Greg's the man. I mean, creating CrossFit and doing what he's done has been amazing. But I think when it comes to nutrition coaching specifically and providing recommendations, I think he's got to get a couple people around him that can help him a little better. And from what I know, Metfix is going to be a company that provides a 2-day certification, very similar to that of CrossFit, like your L1, that allows you now to be a Metfix coach. And then also say that you have a Metfix affiliate, not to be competitive with CrossFit, but almost being the nutrition side of what CrossFit actually is, right? So yeah, that's what Metfix is, in my understanding. He does have a couple partners in it, and so I think that they can do really great things. And our mission statement is awesome. Of curing metabolic disease, saving millions and millions of dollars too, as the industry in general and people's deaths cost so much money,
right?
Especially when it comes to heart disease, obesity, chronic disease. But their messaging for and recommendations on the nutrition side for people are they're not right. They're wrong. Like, it's just what it is. And I felt the need to push back on the post and explain why.
Yeah. So then somehow that got on Hiller's radar because you did a video, you did kind of a response video after that exchange that you had. You did a response video, and then he posted a video, I don't know, 2 or 3 days ago, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, you weren't the main subject of it, but he definitely featured your conversation in that Instagram post. And so then after that, it sounds like maybe there was some more kind of discussion between you and him, and then he eventually invited you on a live. It's kind of what it seemed like.
Yeah. So he reviewed those comments under the CrossFit Book Instagram post and remained pretty neutral. Obviously calories in, calories out versus sugar. Like how much sugar could we be incorporating? Is it on in that gray area? Like what does that mean? What does that mean for regular people that go to CrossFit versus athletes? And he was wanting to have a discussion about that with me, right? And I think, I accepted immediately because I know Hiller online can be very controversial in some of the stuff that he says, but I actually, like, from the messages that I was getting from him and just back and forth, I was like, I don't think this guy is who a lot of people think he is. I think he's actually a pretty cool dude, and that actually became to be the truth. Like I got on with him and we just had a really good conversation before podcast started on the actual live podcast. And then afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Gab, you know him too, right?
Yeah. I have written a barbell spin article about him because I personally think that he's doing incredible work for CrossFit, like him or hate him, agree with what he says or not. And I think the most important thing is that he really cares. And so, having that passion for the industry that we all love, right? Health, fitness, CrossFit, wellness, irrespective of his delivery occasionally, he really, really cares. And so I think that's a really important figure in the space. And so I loved that you went on with him. I really think he's doing good work, we'll call it 90% of the time. And I think he'd agree with that.
Yeah. Well, for him too, like just being a business owner, CBG, and this is not to like toot our horn or anything, but we're the fastest growing nutrition coaching company in the world of people doing 4 to 5 watts per week, right? That's just the reality. And I know what it takes to grow at the trajectory we have and how much content needs to get pushed out, how many conversations need to be had, how many things need to be researched, updated, understood. And for me, I'm like constantly wanting feedback about shit that I'm not doing right, or I could do better, or like this customer is pissed off and then this customer is having a great experience, but they also want to change things in this way that is going to help them better improve, right? Like I want to know all those things. Like I want to know how I can make it better. And any business owner, it's not like that. That's not a good thing. Like you want to have that trait of not being defensive about things that you feel you've implemented that are great, that actually when, consumed by the customer or not. Right. And for the amount of content that he puts out, right? Instagram, for the amount of followers he's growing, subscribers on YouTube, the amount of YouTube videos he puts out, the willingness to go live with me. And we were on the same page because that's how I work. I'm like, he's like, you're free in an hour? I'm like, dude, yeah. Like, let's run it,
Yeah.
The amount of time and effort that goes into that, I don't think people realize. I don't think people realize like the amount of editing that needs to go into that.
Oh, yeah.
Like for my videos, YouTube, I just pay people out. I pay $1,500 for YouTube. I pay more with this podcast that we're doing now. I pay over $2,000 for everything on Instagram. That's over $5,000 just right there.
Yeah.
From editing my videos, my headshots that go there, the other posts that we make on Instagram, the YouTube, the shorts, like all that stuff. I pay over $5,000 for that. That's a lot of work. So that's the amount of work that he does just for himself. Edited. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. So and you're not doing that if you don't care. There's no possible way. It's impossible. Right. You wouldn't stick with it. It'd be like, oh man, I'm not going to do it today. No way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple nuances too with him and where he's obviously doing it for the clicks, right? He like admits that, he's like, yes, I'm doing, but there you can have the same, you can care and like want to see change and want to get, but then also you're obviously doing it because that's how the message gets out. And right. So, I think you got probably accused of, I saw of being desperate for attention. And I'm like, well, I don't know if desperate's the right word, but definitely you're looking for attention because you believe that you have a message that you want people to get, right? So you're trying to get the message out. And so getting like, that's obvious. Like, of course you want attention to this message because you believe that you have the right message.
Did people say that on the live board or something? That
I didn't see that in the live chat, but it seemed like that was the tone, I guess. I mean, I guess that's just there's assumptions there that I'm making, right?
Yeah.
But it seemed like, because going through the chat, when I rewatched it, I watched it the first time through, and then I watched it again and just went through the chat, and I was just like, because me personally, I'm kind of still a little bit in the middle there with Hiller somewhat. But like, there were people that in the chat, it was like they weren't even listening to what you were saying.
They thought I was just there to be there. I have more followers than Hiller. I'm the A side.
Yeah. Well, and you got I think you got a Hiller bump too, because I mean, you went from, I think you're at like almost 90,000 followers on Instagram, and that was, I think you were at like maybe 75. I don't know exactly where you're at, but
I was above 80. I was above him beforehand. I think I was like in the 82 range.
Oh, okay. Well, then you got another bump than.
Not that this matters, but if everybody's gonna say I'm 89.7. I got like 5,000 followers from doing that live.
Yeah. You jumped quite a bit.
And he probably did too. I'm sure he got some from us. Because he was at, I think he was at like right at 80. It's 80.9, so almost 81.
Yeah, but I think there was some of the comments that were like saying like, oh, this is about getting forever clients, and just wanting to make more money, and like, obviously you're a business person, you are trying to make money. That is a part of it, obviously. But to just attach that's just like your motivation, right? Like that's the only motivation that you have for any of this is, I don't think that's fair.
I really think people who say that don't understand how coaching works, right? Like, if telling people, oh, you can have some sugar occasionally, right? You don't have to give it up entirely. I'm not asking you to never have cake again for the rest of your life. If that's me sabotaging someone to keep them as a client forever, like, how much work is that for me? How much effort do I have to put into each and every client? Like, I want you to be able to do things and live your life, and quite frankly, like, leave the nest so that I can help other people. If I wanted the same loop of clients for the rest of my life, realistically, how would we make money? How would we continue to grow? How would we help more people? Like, it just doesn't, from a business perspective alone, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I'll give the numbers on this. Well, I won't give the exact numbers, but I'll give some statistics. So we sign up people for 3 to 4 months. And at the 4-month mark, we all have a conversation about what's next. And if the client's ready to go off on their own and they want to leave the nest, they have all the tools and resources, that they go off on their own, right? And that's 50% of people that go off on their own. The other 50 continue with us because they have other goals that they want to reach, and they love the experience, right? And to be honest, CBG makes more on the front end, signing up new people, way more than a continuation on the back end. The continuation on the back end after the 16 weeks is like a third of the price, or like 2/5 of the price as when you originally sign up per month.
Yeah.
So like, why wouldn't I just, if that's what I cared about, why wouldn't I just keep signing up people? I want to just sign up people on the front end if I'm just in it for the money side.
Right? Yeah.
And
like, not only that, but Joel, you're my client, right? I am your nutrition coach. If I was not teaching you anything or giving you the tools, and you were reliant on me 24 hours a day to make the right decision, would you still be interested? Like, would you be here right now with these glowing reviews about how much you love what we do? You'd be like, why? Now I'm like, I need to ask permission every time I'm hungry. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think you'd like me too much.
No. Let's just get one thing clear. Absolutely not. At some point, we need to have a little bit of space.
Right. Exactly. All right. So yeah, that was I thought it was a great conversation. I thought it was good for you to outline some things. And I think it was a good cross pollination of audiences. And for Hiller's maybe like really diehard audience, for them to be able to look at you maybe hopefully a little bit more objectively, maybe and say, okay, maybe because the going back and forth, because you mentioned this with Hiller's, going back and forth in comments, like it's hard to really like lay out what the message that you're trying to say in like one sentence at a time.
Yeah, it's really hard.
So I thought that was good that you could sit down with him and do that. There are a couple areas that that I'd like to bring up and just go a little bit, maybe just a little bit more into them.
Mm-hmm.
Because he brought up so the part about the conspiracy side of things, right? So you kind of gave out the accusation like, hey, you're all conspiracy theorists, right?
Yeah.
So and he brought up, I was glad that he brought up that basically that's because of the NSCA case.
Mm-hmm.
So are you familiar with that case? Like what all went through with that?
Somewhat. Do we want to pull it up and read a brief overview of the case?
I didn't have that ready. That was probably a good idea.
No, that's okay. We can keep talking, and then we can.
Well, I think I can. I followed it. I followed it quite a bit. So, like I've listened a lot to Greg before.
Yeah.
I feel like I might be able to give a decent summary.
Okay.
That's quick. So basically, what they discovered through that process is, the NSCA was behind a absolutely false study to show that CrossFit was dangerous. So it was done at Ohio State, I think. And so when the study came out and it was published, and CrossFit immediately, like Greg, legal team and everything immediately went after this study.
Yeah.
So in the process of that playing out in the court system and going through the discovery and all that stuff, what they discovered was it was absolutely completely false, and that the NSCA was behind it, that they had pushed it. And then even further than that, they found another layer of that there was funding even beyond that. The NSCA was behind it, but then there was funding behind the NSCA to push it, which I think was like the sugar, right? The sugar industry. I don't remember exactly what companies or whatever were behind the funding of it, but there was an attachment to the funding of it. And so then what played out then in court was that it was this nefarious attempt to destroy CrossFit.
Right.
And so then that opened up, I think, a Pandora's box then for Greg. And like, this is his new war. This is his new battle now.
Yeah.
Because with the whole premise of protecting the affiliates.
Sure.
And then started to find that all of, a lot of studies then, like digging deep into studies and seeing that there's funding behind them, and like that their numbers are just manufactured, and there's things that are studies that would then have to be retracted, but then there wouldn't be any like real report about it, because it was tried to be buried, but it was like just like making stuff up.
Yeah.
So I wanted Hiller to go a little bit deeper into that when he brought it up, because that's where that side's coming from. Because as soon as you bring up a study, they're immediately like, whatever, that's BS, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know the details of the CrossFit study, but obviously, like, okay, what you're saying is people have lost trust in science and studies and all this because this case is very fresh and has just come up, right? That the NSCA is basically trying to crush CrossFit through falsified scientific data, right? That they published, right? Okay, that's fair. That doesn't mean that every single study out there is just garbage and doesn't matter, right? So as an example, and I'll give an example of this, like I said, I don't know the actual details of that study, but when you publish a research article, right? First off, you get all the data that you need for the study. You complete it. It takes several years to do this, by the way, for most studies, right? It's not like a survey study. It's like you're literally doing experiments in a lab, especially when it comes to nutrition, right? Sometimes in a lab, sometimes implementing actual studies where people have to be observed, people have to intake certain things. And so a couple things that people do to verify and validify studies more is they do randomized control trials, meaning someone like, let's say we all three sign up for a study, you wouldn't know like what X supplement that you were being provided One person would get a placebo, not know about it. One person would get creatine, know about it. Another person would be a placebo. And then we would see the effects at the end of the study. So even the people don't know. So randomized control trials like that help verify that the participants are not, right? And there's no placebo effect. That's one example, right, of a randomized control trial. Then on top of that, people do meta-analyses. Meta-analyses are studies that are collected about one specific data point. So let's say the effects of creatine on elderly women. They would take 100 studies, they would combine them into one study and get all the data points to come to some sort of scientific consensus about it, right? Now, keep in mind, all these studies are peer-reviewed, meaning it's not just like I'm the lead scientist, I get to go to PubMed and put my article on PubMed, go read it. No, you actually have to send to 3 to 5 peer-reviewed other scientists that are experts within the field. They have to review, approve. A lot of times they don't approve it the first time. They say, hey, you need to add in this additional study, right? Because if not, we can't know conclusively that this is a realistic data point that we can stand behind. So then you have to do more studies. That takes another 6 months, right? Then you send it back for another round of approval. So, I mean, doing all of that and saying everything's funded by the sugar industry amongst all studies and having zero zero hope in science is just like it kind of doesn't make sense. But I get that the trust is kind of waning for people just because that study came out and it was specifically about CrossFit.
Yeah,
that's a whole separate thing. It's the nutrition piece that me and Hiller went over, and there's so much nutrition information and data out there. So that's kind of, I just want to separate the two, but I understand like where people come from, that when someone says study or science, they're just like, oh, I'm out. I don't care.
Yeah. And that's where that's coming from. And honestly, that's what the whole Broken Science Initiative is. I mean, that's the drum that they're beating is,
of course,
is that, hey, you know, I've heard Greg say one time, he was like, listen, drink a Coke. I don't care if you drink a Coca-Cola. He's like, I just don't want them involved in scientific studies. Like, I just don't want them involved in that stuff. And so that's the drum that he's beating. And that's why you're meeting so much resistance from that side, is because, you know, they believe in, and so I guess that's maybe my question is are you open then to hearing more of that? Like, cause it's on them to prove it, right? It's on them to show the proof that this system is broken, and that's what their mission is kind of.
Their mission is,
right now.
Yeah. And look, you can do this through a lot of funding. This happened maybe 5 years ago with the what's it called? That vegan documentary, Gab, the most famous.
Yes. Oh my God.
What's the name of that thing? I don't remember.
As soon as you said it, it was like there and then gone. Like,
yeah. There are so many of them, but it's
the most famous one. Let me look it up really quick. Vegan.
It's
everybody like that watches this later and be like screaming it, and we're like,
Game Changers.
Game Changers.
What the health? Forks over knives. Oh, Game Changers.
Game Changers is the one.
Yeah.
And what they found with the Game Changers documentary, as documentaries are, like, people knew that this was the case, right? That the whole documentary was funded by plant-based, manufacturers, scientists, organizations, everything, right? And then they look back at the studies, and then all the studies are promoted by a lot of plant-based, blah, 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 right? And so you can go back, like, take a study, like take one of these meta-analyses that I'm saying, and we can go over today, that sugar didn't cause the obesity epidemic, because it did not. It just didn't.
Right.
It's impossible. And I'll go over that today. I want to clarify. I'm not saying sugar is great and go have sugar every day of your life, because that's what a lot of people think I keep saying. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying calories cause the obesity epidemic, not sugar. Do a lot of high calorie foods have sugar? Yes, I know. I get it. I get this isn't confusing, but it's not sugar, right? In and of itself, as an isolated independent variable, it's not sugar. Go back and look at some of the studies and see who they're funded by. It says it. It says it all there. If they're all funded by the sugar industry, great. give me the data proving that. You can't just be like, oh, everything's fun about the sugar industry, but have where's your backing to that? Just because the one study from the NSCA with CrossFit, it doesn't. You have to come with some sort of substance behind like what it is. You know?
Well, like I said, I think that was the catalyst that opened up floodgates to it. But all right, so a couple other nuances then was the addiction piece, and so this is one area where I admit that I'm now, like I said, I don't live the no sugar way. Like, you know, that now I definitely have, you know, I do one diet break a week, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, you do.
I will say, with the caveat that sometimes I might have some dark chocolate, like a little bit of dark chocolate here and there, but I don't count that as my diet break, right? So I had a diet break on Friday, Saturday. My wife's and I's anniversary, 17 years. Love you, honey.
Nice. Congrats.
Our marriage is almost an adult. Thank you. But I had a small ice cream cone, right? Like, and I kept it a small ice cream cone. I was going to try to get a chocolate milkshake, but UDF had this special. I'm telling you, this thing was giant. I've never seen a milkshake this big before. Wow. There's people that actually consume that, and I was like, oh no, I'm just going to get a small ice cream. Anyways, so I'm not living the no sugar life, right? Yeah. But I have a background in I was a licensed chemical dependency counselor for many years, and so I have a background in dealing with addiction, and there's certainly addictive behaviors that are attached to food, right? We see that for sure. Now, whether that's specific to sugar and stuff like that, that's where you start to like. Right, you know, like, is it sugar? Is it something else? You know, there's correlation, but is it causation? Like, that's kind of some of the points you were saying with Hiller. Yeah. But my kind of like somewhat of resistance towards the way that you present what you presented is that because they brought up the heroin thing, right? Which I think is kind of apples to oranges, but from the addiction like kind of specialist standpoint, it reminds me of what we used to call a harm reduction approach in the addiction field. And I was never on board with the harm reduction approach. So like what the harm reduction approach would look at was look at somebody that's addicted to heroin, meth, whatever it is, right? Something big. Yeah. And that harm reduction approach would say, listen, if smoking weed every day keeps you from using heroin or meth, then let's smoke weed every day. But to me, that's not sobriety, right? And then I would see people in the community and they'd be like celebrating 5 years sober. And it's like, dude, you smoke weed every day. You're not sober, you know? Yeah. So, but I also kind of understand like, well, at least they're alive and they're not addicted to heroin because smoking weed every day is way more of a lifestyle, right? Functional lifestyle than heroin. But at the same time, I'm just like, that's still not personal accountability. That's still kind of like setting limitations on what someone can do and giving them an excuse and that kind of stuff. Right. So from an addiction standpoint, how do you guys as coaches handle someone like that where there is kind of a clear food addiction that's present?
Well, I think right now that sounds a little black and white to me. Like it sounds a little bit like you're either going to be completely sober and in this case, like void of any junk food. You're never going to eat junk food again. Or the other option is you can have it once a day, but it can't be, milk chocolate. It has to be dark chocolate. And now we've solved the problem. And for me, I think the solution is, okay, if you are eating chocolate every single day, if you are having a Hershey bar every day, let's go to dark chocolate because it's at least a better step. And then from there, we're going to cut down how much you're having and we're going to replace that with something like fruit, right? Or something that's a little bit less unhealthy. And then eventually, step by step, we're going to get you to a place where you don't want the dark chocolate anymore because you've started to realize that it makes you feel like crap and you function better and you feel better and you look better when you are eating things that are healthier. And so to me, it's not a black and white. It's not you can have sugar every day. It's listen, we're going to take steps to get you in a healthier direction. And it's going to start with a small change. And every so often that change is going to get bigger and bigger. So this whole black and white, you're either doing heroin heroin, or, you're smoking weed every day, or you're totally sober. Like, that's not the direction that I want people to go in. And, the other thing I think we need to mention is that everybody's different. There are definitely people out there who are like, I'm ready to make a change. And so all of these junk foods that I eat every day, I'm going to give them up cold turkey. And then there are people who are like, I know I need to make a change and I want to make a change, but I can't do it overnight. Can you help me get there? And food is emotional. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I have a conversation with people where they break down crying because they're so unhappy with their body or the way they feel or the way they look. And then in the next breath, they're like, but I need to be able, I'm not going to eat anything, nothing but boiled chicken and rice all day. Like, I can't do nothing but broccoli. I need to have, and it's like, okay, well, 5 seconds ago you were sobbing, so okay. And those are the times that we've got to make those small steps and those small changes, and it can't be black and white. Everybody is different and everybody needs their own approach, and my job is to help them get there by whatever steps that I need to take.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially from like the coaching Gen Pop perspective,
Right.
Joel, can someone just cold turkey heroin?
They can.
It's probably,
but do they?
Really, really painful. Like, do they have, like, I know alcoholism's like, and for, I want to, before I keep going, comparing sugar as an addiction to the same as we do heroin is literally a slap in the face to people who have real addiction.
Yes.
I just want to say that first off, because it's not even fucking close. It's not even close. I mean, come on, like, literally think about that.
In terms of like the consequences, like the daily consequences, you mean of like
the daily consequence, and then the actual addictive nature. Sugar in and of itself is not addictive. It's not an addiction. It's not. If it was, everybody we sitting here just like shoving apples down their mouth. Who has any inclination to do that? No one.
Yeah.
Apples is straight fructose. It's a 5-membered ring, sugar molecule. It's exactly what an apple is. So why is nobody just like shoving apples down? No one, not anyone on planet Earth is doing that. Why?
Right.
So what is not addicting?
What is the addiction then? Because I think that food is like, there is a
high calorie, hyperpalatable food dependency.
So that's the addiction, and sugar is just kind of like a contributor.
It's to in a lot of those foods. So people associate it with sugar, but there's no causation. It's just in a lot of those foods. But it's the same thing with a burger. Like a burger also, same thing. Like people love burgers, high calorie, but doesn't really have a lot of sugar in it. It's the same thing, right? So if there was table sugar right here, right? If there was heroin right here and there was a heroin addict, boom, it's done. If there's table salt sugar right here, like just grains of white sand right here, nobody's like who's doing that?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Sugar's not addicting. Like explain, like get any rebuttal. There's zero. There's nothing you could say. Zero. It's not addicting. Right?
So you're saying it's the hyper palatable processed food. Sugar happens to be in it, but it's just the addiction to that hyper palatable food in any combination, whether it's lots of sodium and sugar and whatever else they do to engineer it.
And that's the thing, like hyper palatable is high sugar, high salt, high fat. And if you put a bowl of Doritos or, Tostitos on the table, it's very hard to walk away from that. But nobody is walking around saying that salt is addicting. But it is, right? Like you have one chip, it's very hard to walk away. We all know that. We all experience that. But yet we demonize sugar. But salt is the same, high fat, right? Like a burger. We crave those things that are really the high in saturated fats and unsaturated fat, just like very, but we don't walk around saying meat is addicting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's exactly. That's a good way to put it. Like a burger is like just the same affinity people have because it has the high calories, but nobody's like, oh, 80-20 ground beef is addicting. Right. That's the same comparison saying sugar, just because sugar's in a lot of those foods, right?
Yeah.
And then, something to add to that is heroin has a specific receptor, right, in the body, lock and key, right, that it replaces. And that's why it becomes so addicting, like where people like actually have withdrawals because the receptor's there, but you're not giving it the actual drug, right? Sugar, glucose, fructose also have these receptors, right? But broccoli gets broken down into glucose.
Much slower though, right?
much slower, but it's still in your bloodstream where
Yeah.
and could get to those same receptors, and it does get to those same receptors.
So
So
then,
why is nobody addicted to broccoli? It
right.
literally breaks down into the same thing. It's because of the taste. It's because of the taste of the
Mm.
sugar, salt, and high calorie food and fatty high calorie foods combined into one that are hyper palatable. That is the issue, right?
So it's the reaction to that taste. Like there's probably, a dopamine release or
Right.
something in the brain that associates this
That's it.
really tasty thing with, oh, this is really good. I want as much of this as possible.
And again,
Right.
it's emotional, right? So
Mhm.
not everybody eats when they're emotional. Like, I don't know, I love to shop online. When I have a bad day, like you best believe I'm getting something coming in the mail. And that releases that same dopamine rush. And now every time something emotional happens, I'm like, I gotta buy something. And that doesn't mean that I'm addicted to shopping online. It just means that I have conditioned myself that when I feel emotional or when I need something to make me feel better, that's what I turn to. Some people
Mhm.
do it with chocolate. Some people do it with salt. Some people do it with burgers. It doesn't matter. I'm not addicted to the act of typing in my credit card number. That's not what's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is the part then I think where like it's like people aren't really listening to you because
No, they're not.
you said a bunch of times that like because you recognize that food addiction is a real thing. The only part where you and Greg go like this a little bit is his is directly associated connected with sugar, and you're saying no, there is a food addiction, but it's hyper palatable, all the other engineered stuff
Mhm.
that's causing the brain to be like, oh, I want so much of that.
Yep.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Yep.
I think that's a good clarification that I don't think you and Hiller went as deep on
Yeah.
with that specific component. All right, one more thing that I have are some anecdotal examples of when you talk about um, calories being the cause of chronic disease, right?
Mhm.
And they're saying that sugar is the driver of chronic disease. So like type 2 diabetes, all of that list,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So because when I think of high calories, bringing in a lot of calories, and because you talked about obesity, and maybe we're going to get to that with the BioLane thing that you have ready, but two examples. One example is my father-in-law is a type 2 diabetic.
Mhm.
Has never been obese. He's always like he always had that metabolism where
Mhm.
basically he could eat whatever he wants and never gain an ounce, you know, and
Yeah.
it's like hard for him to put on weight. But he would keep a 12 pack of Pepsi in his truck with him, drink one on the way to work, drink many all day at work, drink one on the way home. Like, I mean, Pepsi was like he was constantly drinking Pepsi, right? And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden one day he's got type 2 diabetes.
Mhm.
So that's one anecdotal
Yep.
example.
Okay.
The
Yep.
second one is I did a missions trip. I've gone to Mexico a couple times, to the Yucatan Peninsula, right in the middle. If you're familiar with the wonder of the world, Chichen Itza, the Mayan city, very, very close to Chichen Itza, like 15 minutes away from there. Um, and we visited a lot of different villages and stuff. This area is ravaged with type 2 diabetes. Just absolutely. We would go to a house, a little hut or something, and almost everyone we went to, it seemed like there was at least one family member that was suffering from a symptom of type 2 diabetes, whether it was they had a limb amputated or blindness, or I mean, something like serious, right? And not
Mhm.
all of them old, like some of them young, like in their 20s. Like there was a kid had a leg amputated because of type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola is cheaper and easier to get a hold of than clean drinking water.
Mhm.
They drink Coca-Cola for every meal
Yeah.
all the time, constantly. But none of them are
Yep.
overweight, right? Because they're constantly working, like they're moving
Right.
around, like they're burning calories.
Yeah.
So those are the only two things that I think of that I'm like, man, what explains that then? If it's, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? So, all right, so beat me up. Tell me
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. So two things, right? Number one, some people have a more difficult time um metabolizing carbohydrates, right? So their blood glucose levels stay higher for longer, right? You ever when people say we have a predisposition to have heart disease, higher LDL, but they're at a good weight range. It's the same thing. Those people have trouble clearing LDL cholesterol, which causes arterial plaque formation, right? Eventually, if it's like constantly in your blood, usually it's usually defined in your doctor through LDL particle number, which doctors are still not testing for as much as just like flat LDL. But either way, like people have poor clearance of LDL. It's just a genetic predisposition some of us have, right? Therefore, those people need to eat a lower fat diet in order to make sure they keep their LDL and overall cholesterol at a range that doesn't cause that arterial plaque formation, right? For people like this, it could be one, they have this predisposition where their carb utilization is low, right? Two, it could be that they're not working out, because when you work out, you're going to utilize a lot of those carbohydrates. And three, it's the answer you want to hear. They're over consuming too many carbohydrates. They're literally drinking Coke all day long as their source of like water. Right. And it's the same with their relative or whoever you mentioned, right? Like literally just like sugar all the time. Right. So there is a mechanism to get to type 2 diabetes and be at a healthy weight range, because the calories consumed in this case, right, are low enough relative to the BMR of the person to stay at a stable weight range and not gain weight, but they're at a 70-20-10 carb fat protein, right? Like in terms of macro-based percentages. Yeah, there's a mechanism there that can get you to being type 2 diabetic, pre-diabetic, or whatever, 100%.
Okay. All right. So you would say that you and Greg then are on the same page with something like that.
You can definitely consume enough sugar to get there and still be at a healthy weight range, 100%. And you can either have low blood glucose clearance, which means it stays in the blood longer. Insulin receptors aren't binding, and blood glucose, like too much sugar in your blood, right, is toxic actually. Right. This is why type 1 diabetics can die if they don't take insulin. Right. Yeah. Two, they're not working out at all. Right. Or enough to burn off, because that's the number one fuel source for any workout that we really do. Right. Or three, I mean, legitimately, it doesn't matter if they're just eating too many carbohydrates. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's literally the only three ways that can happen. But yeah, if you're eating too many carbs, like it can definitely happen to you, even if
And
you're
not to mention, a high fat diet will also contribute to that, because if the insulin receptors are clogged with fat from having fat in your blood, then it's also going to contribute to that type 2 diabetes. So if you're drinking a ton of Coke and also eating a lot of burgers, that's a recipe for disaster. And you don't have to be overweight.
That is the current most scientific consensus understood and believed hypothesis around type 2 diabetes, heart disease, metabolic disease, is being overweight, right? Those fat cells and you being overweight in that way blocks the ability for the insulin receptors to take up the blood glucose, right? And then obviously you need to start taking insulin in order to do that, because you have to pump your body with more insulin to get the ratio correct to bind the insulin receptor and then go from there. That's the number one like up-to-date hypothesis in a scientific consensus, which is why calories, right, which also come with higher carbohydrate diets usually, as well as sugar. Actually, that's quite some discipline, I must say, your relative to be like eating that much sugar, carbohydrate, and be at a stable body weight. That motherfucker is probably just like not eating and just drinking Coke. Like honestly, like
no, well, that's the thing. That's why I said it. Like he's one of those people that like his metabolism was, I mean, he's been type 2 diabetes for a long time now. But he was one of those people that he could literally eat anything he wanted, as much as he wanted, and wouldn't gain an ounce. And he was very active too. Like they had a big property, 5 acres. Like he was always taking care of something outside. He worked, on his feet, moving around a lot. Like, so he had a lot of movement going on. But yeah, it was, and then, eventually at one point he started having symptoms and goes and gets checked. And it's like, oh, they diagnosed him with type 2 diabetes. So
It goes in both ways, though. I mean, my dad is a chef, so very active, very on his feet all day, every day, very sweaty, right? Like constantly moving around under high temperatures. He has a metabolism that is so high that in order to avoid passing out, he relies on very hyperpalatable foods for very high calorie intake because psychologically, when you're a chef and you're cooking all day, the last thing you want to do when you get home from work is cook yourself food, right? So in order to keep himself alive, he is the king of like Coke and yodels and wingdings and all that garbage. And he is a smoker, healthy as can be, 55 years old, thin as a rail, eats nothing but garbage, smokes, drinks Coke, healthy as can be. I don't know how. I mean, I don't want him to, right? Like I wish he wouldn't, but not a type 2 diabetic, no problem with his heart, with his lungs, nothing. Like some people are just, they can handle it. And some people conversely can't.
Yeah. And Greg's just stuck on the sugar obesity hypothesis, and that's just where he is. And he's not going to change his mind. He thinks if you eat sugar at all or with any moderate amount, you're going to get fat, which is just not true. All my athletes have more sugar than all of us. Danielle Brannon, they're the leanest, strongest, healthiest looking people you've ever seen. And their blood work also would indicate the exact same thing because they're training at such a high intensity. So it can't be sugar. Like it's impossible. It's just not.
If I may, I'd like to bring up a point that I don't think gets talked about enough in this conversation. That's sort of like the antithesis, where somebody, I think personally, pushed it too far in the other direction. I'd love to know both of your takes on this. It's funny because we're talking about Hiller, and I've already said that I think he's great. I like him a lot as a person. I think what he's doing generally is really good. And he takes umbrage with this person quite a bit. And so I want to start by saying I have no issue with this person. I don't care. But I think they put out a narrative that was like a little unhealthy and dangerous. And that person is Danny Spiegel. So Danny Spiegel and her Girls Who Eat and her affinity for crumble cookies, I think did a major disservice to her audience because, like you said, Justin, these athletes who are training as a full-time job, right? Way more than any of us combined, are able to eat these high-calorie, hyper-palatable foods. In fact, oftentimes we encourage them to so that they can get the calories they need, much like what I said about my dad. But I think this narrative was very akin to like the body positivity. You can eat whatever you want, like love yourself, eat the cookie, it's great. And then conversely, I have all of these women coming to me through Consistency Breeds Growth and talking to us about how unhappy they are with their bodies, that they are gaining weight at a rapid rate, that they're uncomfortable in their clothes, their workouts are not as productive as they used to be. And I think this whole, eat the crumble cookie, do whatever you want, Girls Who Eat, we're strong, we can eat. Like, yeah, Danny can do that. The rest of us cannot. And it's unhealthy to think that we can. And it is definitely not leading us toward the ideal body composition, which is why most of us started doing CrossFit anyway, right? To be healthier and stronger and look better naked, etc. So as much as I think Greg is extreme in his we should not be eating sugar at all narrative, I think the eat whatever the hell you want because you work out and love yourself is just as bad. But yet nobody is talking about that.
Yeah. I think, and maybe this gets across to people. I think Danny's message is possibly worse.
Yeah, me too. 100%. I've said that the whole damn time.
Yeah, if anything, I think her message is worse. Like I know there's context to what she's saying. Like she wants women to be strong, and like her message there is not intentionally like I'm trying to ruin whatever. She just because a lot of women undereat, right?
Right.
A lot of women undereat,
absolutely.
and they don't eat enough, and then they binge eat later, and so like all these things, right? And then they don't lose weight. So there's different ways and pathways for people to get unhappy with where they are. But yeah, telling people they can kind of eat whatever they want, and whenever, like, I know that's not like, but that's the message that does come across for some people, And I think that's more damaging, if not just as damaging as the like, hey, never have another cookie ever again, like no sugar at all.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think as a professional and as somebody who counsels people all day, every day, it's a rare moment where I talk about my own nutrition because I know how active I am. I know the training program that I follow. I know my lifestyle. I live in New York City. I walk a lot more than regular people. I train for 3 hours a day. Like there are a lot of things that would mean anything that I do I would recommend to very few of the people that I am coaching. Very similar to the way that Hiller put up that thing where, the things I did when I was an elite CrossFitter versus what I told my affiliate members to do. They're two very different things. And so for her to be at this, activity level and to have as much muscle mass on her as she does, and all of the things that make her incredible, to be kind of pushing that narrative to regular women that we all know, if you're doing CrossFit class 3 times a week for an hour a day, good on you. It's better than nothing, but it's definitely not justifying a crumble cookie. It's definitely not justifying this extreme calorie intake. And I just really don't like it. I don't appreciate it. I think it sets people up for failure, particularly women. And I think it is just pushing this dangerous narrative around, you did a WOD today, so you can eat whatever you want. Like that's what we're out here trying to correct. You can treat yourself, but you also have to eat the appropriate amount to fuel your activity, which is vastly different from hers.
Yeah. And that's 100% true. And hopefully she can kind of start clarifying that message a bit more, because that's the other end of the spectrum of Greg and can be an issue, right? So for us, the reason that I feel so strongly about what we say, and when I'm talking to Hiller, and I don't really care about the comments of people that still disagree, we've helped 10,000 people here at CBG. 10,000.
That's crazy.
We have 700-800 clients in our program right now, today, as we're talking. Joel, you're one of them, right? 700-800 people. If any of these people have a list of 20 people that they've worked with successfully, gotten them the results that they wanted through whatever method it is that they utilize, and they sustain those results, give me a link. I want to see the link. Until then, what you got nothing. You got nothing. You're just talking. You're just talking. You got nothing. Right. So at the end of the day, the results speak for themselves, right? We can talk all day, but what are you going to do? You're not helping anybody. You haven't helped anybody. Right. If you want to help people and learn how to do it right, we have a mentorship program. We could teach you how to do it, but you haven't helped anybody. And that's the last thing I told somebody the other day on a comment. I'm like, look, because I'm responding back and forth all day with this person. I'm like, look, I'm not responding until you post a link of 20 people that you've worked with and gotten deliverable results. I'm not going to respond again. Let me know if you got it. And then I'll post ours that has, 5,000, 10,000 people on it. No problem.
100%.
Right? Could you bring up that graph, Joel, of on the bio lane at the bottom? All the references are here too, guys. If you guys want this link, let us know. But it basically goes over the whole reason why the obesity epidemic was not caused by sugar, and then it was caused by higher calories, right?
Is it this one?
Reiterate. Yes. No, keep going down. That's the high fructose corn syrup one, which let's bring that up. That's actually really good. So high fructose corn syrup, okay, is directly correlated with obesity. All right. High fructose corn syrup is fructose and sucrose put together. That's it. It's sugar, right? Where do we see high fructose corn syrup? Do you guys know?
It's in everything nowadays, right?
It's a preservative.
Oh, okay.
And it's a preservative in what? Highly processed, hyper palatable, high calorie foods.
Right.
With good shelf life.
Exactly. So that's why this is corollary directly. And so people will say, oh, it's high fructose corn syrup. It ain't high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is in those higher calorie, hyperpalatable foods that need a higher shelf life. That's why this graph is directly corollary. If you go down to just sugar, if you keep going, it's going to be kind of close to the bottom. Keep going. That's scientific evidence for any of you guys care about science anymore. There's another graph. Boom. Contest this. Contest it. What sugar intake has dropped. Sugar intake has dropped since 1995. Overall consumption, grams per person per day, right? Obesity, the dotted line graph, has continued to rise. Adults with obesity, percentage-wise, as the population has decreased since then.
I guess as a layperson, this really surprises me, though.
Yeah, because that's what I'm trying to tell. Like, we have consumed sugar less on average because we've quit drinking a lot of the soft drinks. A lot of alternatives with less sugar have come out. Diet, energy drinks. People are drinking coffee like crazy since 1995. Lower sugar. And our consumption of sugar is lower, right? But the foods that are high calorie, preservatives, have ramped. And that's why obesity continues to rise, because of the calories, right? So look at the graph. I mean, I don't even know what else I need to say. Yeah. I don't know what else I need to say. Like, so what can Greg say about this graph?
Yeah.
Maybe that the science is faulty. He needs to go back.
That would be where they would go.
Yeah. But what else are you going to say? That's it. I mean, sugar has literally declined. How is it causing obesity? It's literally impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the rebuttal. Is the
show the graph.
That's what I'm saying, though. That's what the only rebuttal is, right? Is that the graph is false.
False.
But that's why it's like
go to where the graph is from. Why don't we go down a little bit just so people like didn't think I made this fucking graph? What does it say to figure that?
And then it gives the web Stephen Ewanit references from my debate with Gary Taubes on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah,
amazing article that I encourage all of you to read.
Yep. So that's the article. So that's where people got to go to read. And then he has references linked there. You see that little blue circle? So that's a reference. And all these references are at the bottom.
Okay.
Right?
So you can follow his...
Yeah, all the references are at the bottom. Hundreds of them. They have over 100, I think close to 100, between 75 and 100 references in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Lane put out. So...
Paige, one of the incredible coaches at CBG, who I absolutely adore, posted something not that long ago that really stuck with me, and I've referenced it quite a bit to some of my clients, and that is that we have an overconsumption problem. Like, we overconsume everything. There is no such thing as watching one episode. We have to binge watch the whole series. There's no such thing as having one drink. We have to go out and get plastered. You don't have one Oreo, you eat the whole package. We overdo everything as a culture, as a society. And so, yeah, it's really easy to blame one thing and say, this is the demon, this is the problem. And, talk about how that's ruining our lives. But at the end of the day, it's not, right? Like, it's the fact that we can't moderate anything. And there are definitely things that we don't need in moderation. There are some things like heroin. No, don't do it in moderation. Just don't do it at all, right? Oreos. Listen, if you're telling me that Oreos are the only thing in your life that brings you joy, and if I take them away from you, you're not going to have a reason to live, then let's talk about how we can have one or two and fill the rest of your diet with high fiber and veggies and, unrefined carbohydrates and a lot of protein and whatever. And then if you want an Oreo, have a goddamn Oreo, but it's not going to be the biggest portion of your diet anymore, because we've got to make positive changes. But that doesn't mean you can never have it again. But it's not the Oreo that's the problem. It's your inability to have a little bit and then walk away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think people like out there like Greg that are making these generalized recommendations, and Danny Spiegel, eat more, right? Like, they can't be like, hey, eat a little bit of sugar, but how much is, like, they can't go through the nuance. They're literally talking to masses when they're describing it. And that's where people like me, Gab, CBG, and like nutritionists and nutrition coaches need to come in and say, hey, this message of no sugar actually is not appropriate for most people. This is why, but we should work on limiting sugar, because a lot of the sugar out there that we have access to is in these higher calorie, hyper palatable foods. And we should instead be inclusive by incorporating more of these really great foods that also Greg says to include, right? In the Fitness in 100 Words, include more of those so that we can limit this sugar thing, right? But there's a study also that shows that people that incorporate one cheat meal a week, right? End up eating way more calories overall than necessary than people that just incorporate like the little bit of dark chocolate throughout the week and then had that one recovery meal and eat consistently throughout the day. You have your recovery meal. Don't just like quit eating everything throughout the day just so you can save for your recovery meal. You're going to eat even more. You're going to eat double, triple weight. So like these studies are shown. So like saying no sugar is like just setting up people to eliminate, binge, restrict, repeat. And our I think human behavior, right? And our physiology is literally set up to do that. It's literally set up to do that. Like it's set up to be like, let's eat as much as possible, harvest. We don't know when we're going to eat again, right? Restrict, feel guilty. We wouldn't have felt guilty as a caveman because we didn't really care about what we looked. And also we were probably pretty lean in general because we didn't know when our next meal was going to be, and we didn't have the ability to overconsume. Now you can get anything at any time, right? Restrict, guilt, restrict, and guess what? Repeat, and then go in this perpetual cycle. That's what saying no sugar actually does to people. If you want to get down to like the real, actual, like coaching, like us coaching people, if we were to just tell people no sugar, all of our clients, almost all of our clients would fail. So
and here's the thing.
Yeah.
Like people know they shouldn't have sugar. No one on this planet is walking around going, I don't understand why I'm fat. All I eat is Oreos and ice cream. How could this be? Like we all know that, but it's much easier said than done. And that's why we have jobs, right? Because we're going to help guide people. We're going to provide them with support. We're going to give them tips and tricks and help them. And it's not going to be, okay, here are your macros. Don't ever eat sugar again. Text me on Monday. Like good luck with your life. That's not what we do. And if that was what we did, we would not have any clients.
100%.
Yeah, so it's what I see is like a difference. There's a couple things where I think sometimes it's like maybe the audiences are different. Like the audience that Greg is speaking to with that message is the very sick audience that's already in the chronic disease area. You don't agree with that, Gab?
No, I'm going to be honest with you. And I think this is something that we also need to address. I think Greg is speaking, he's talking in an echo chamber of people like Hiller and people that, are already not consuming sugar, people who are already diehard CrossFit enthusiasts. And that's great.
Hiller's consuming sugar.
Well, yes, we know that. Of course he is, right? Like he's also consuming testosterone, but that's neither here nor there. Listen, if we're saying it, right? I think he's speaking to people that already agree with him, because I know plenty of people that are sick and dying and have type 2 diabetes and are overweight, and they're not changing anytime soon, because they haven't already. Right. Yeah. But the thing is, there are people out there, like Hiller references at one point that he was a wrestler and he would need to make weight. So for a week, he would live on one glass of water and be in a sauna suit and sweat it all out. That's great that he has that level of discipline, but not everybody does. I know plenty of people that are so disciplined. They don't miss a workout. They don't miss, their protein goal ever. They never eat anything they shouldn't eat. They're always, and that's great, but that's a very small percentage of the population. Most people do not have that level of discipline. That's how they got into this situation in the first place. And so he's speaking to people, I think, that are already like, yeah, sugar is bad. You should never have any. And this is how we're going to cure the obesity epidemic. I don't know anybody who is obese that is sitting around feeling sorry for themselves, but they've watched every Greg Glassman interview ever, and they fully agree with him, and they've decided this is how they're going to change their life. That's not what's happening. He's speaking to his audience, into his echo chamber, and we are the ones that are talking to the regular people who would like to make a change but don't quite yet know how, and aren't ready to cold turkey everything they love.
Yeah. And I want to add one thing to this, and this hopefully gets people to understand a little bit more about like where I stand with this. What Greg is saying is actually not wrong. You can actually get to your results that way.
Of course.
That's what
legitimately you can.
Yeah.
You can actually do that. Like you can have lean meat, nuts and seeds, little starch, little fruit, no sugar. Like you could actually get to your results that way. I just think there are several better ways. And while people implement that, like in theory, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because eliminating and demonizing a certain food only makes us crave and want to binge it more. And so therefore, it's not wrong, but it's not the right implementation for people to get the best results possible or in a sustainable way. Right.
Yeah, so
and I would be hard pressed. I would love for someone that says that they eat no sugar at all, like none. Like let me, where are you? I want to see who you are. I want to monitor your full stuff. I want to get your partner involved so that you're being honest. And I know that you're literally throughout a whole month, never eating any sugar at all, anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'd also like to say this whole fitness in 100 words, great. I love the idea. Okay, whatever. But I've had clients who, part of what I do is after I have an intro call with somebody, they send me 4 days worth of pictures of everything they eat so I can see for myself, because oftentimes what people think they're consuming is not what they're actually consuming.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, nuts and seeds, you can really overdo it with the nuts and seeds. Like there are people that are eating bags of peanuts, and fat has 9 calories per gram. And again, usually they're salted, right? So they're hyper palatable because it's fat and salt, but we don't demonize that. But they're eating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calories of nuts sitting at their desk doing nothing. And then they're like, gee, I wonder why I'm 30% body fat. And it's like, yeah, I know you're following the fitness in 100 words, but it's not that simple. It's not just this, list that you can follow blindly and everything is going to work out for you. There are still requirements based on your, body size, your activity level, your genetics, your metabolism, all of that stuff. So yeah, that's great, Greg. Eat meats, nuts and seeds, little stuff, whatever, but like not in unlimited quantities and just screw everything else.
Well, and to be fair to the fitness in 100 words, it does specify to eat at levels that support. It says, I'm trying to remember the exact verbiage, but it says
it's like body fat activity, but not body fat or something.
Fat,
right. But like, who knows that? I've never met someone who's like, and I found exactly what I need to support activity, but not increase body fat. Like,
people don't know, like, unless you're a coach or like whatever.
Well, I was going to say that's where Gab, the coach, comes in and tells you those levels need to be at. Right. So, all right. So the summation that I think that I've gathered as an observer of kind of both sides here is that CBG, you agree that both ways can get to the desired results. Your approach is kind of takes, I don't know if gentler is the right word, but like there's compassion involved maybe, or but like, because Greg is very matter of fact. I've listened to him a lot and he's just very matter of fact, and it's he boldly states, I have the cure for the world's most vexing problem. And for the person that responds with, well, but that's too hard for me, his response is, okay, we'll stay fat and sick and die an early death. And I wish you the best, though. Like that's kind of, I think, and maybe, I don't know, that's kind of maybe putting words in his mouth. Maybe that's an unfair observation of how he puts it, but that's maybe the differences that I've observed in that can get you there. Greg's obviously that can get you to where you need to be, but you're making the argument that, hey, CBG can get you there too. We can do it differently. That in what you would say would be a more sustainable way to maintain it.
Yeah. I got the solution too. Just just get rid of all high calorie, hyper palatable foods off the shelf. But I can't fucking do that. It's capitalism. That's it. Right. That's just the way it is. It's just the way the world works, and none of these things are going anywhere. So I don't know what his stance is on that. I don't know him or Savan or anybody. Like, what do they want these companies to do, like Snickers and all them? Do they want to just eliminate them?
I think they want to eliminate their influence.
Yeah.
I think that's what the Broken Science Initiative is eliminate their influence. The influence.
Yeah. Through the people, personal responsibility through the people. Yeah. And we should limit those things, like in our diet, of course.
100%.
Yeah. They're big on personal responsibility and accountability, and Savan will say things like, don't argue people's limitations, and that's kind of like his stance on it, while he's probably drinking alcohol sometimes and eating sugar too.
Oh, don't even get me started. I will die on that hill. Like all these people that I talk to that are like, oh my God, I don't want to eat carbs because it turns to sugar, but they end the day with a margarita. It's like,
Yeah, stop.
okay.
Or another
this one lady I'm talking to, she's like 40, 50 pounds overweight. The one that's like, oh yeah, you don't know, you're stupid. Like just talking crap on Hiller's comments. Like she's overweight.
Yeah.
I've seen her stuff. I haven't said that to her because she knows. But I mean, that's because you're over consuming calories, not because of sugar. You don't need sugar, right?
Yeah.
So,
I like to frame this sort of, Joel, just to put it in another way that I think maybe more people can sort of digest, no pun intended, a little bit more easily. I do CrossFit. I think CrossFit is the best way to get in shape. I think CrossFit changed my body. I think CrossFit changed my relationship with challenge. I think CrossFit is more fun than other ways of training. I love it. It's like 90% of my personality, as it is for most of us. However, if my mother, who I don't think has exercised since 1999, and Mom, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but like my mother, if she told me I'm going to go to Pure Barre, I would be thrilled. Do I want to do it? No. Do I think it's the best way to exercise? No. Is it better than her sitting on her ass all the time? Absolutely. Will it maybe get her to then try F45 or Orange Theory and then maybe someday pick up a barbell? Who knows, right? Like that would be awesome. But it's so much like that tiny little baby step, even though I am light years ahead of that, is incredible. And it would make me so happy. And it's the same thing with nutrition. We don't need you to be an elite CrossFitter right away. I'm not dumping you into competition and saying sink or swim, good luck. Any little step in the right direction is good. And hopefully someday you'll get to where we want you to be. But if the only option were be sedentary or compete at the games, everybody would be out of shape. And that's just it. And Glassman knows that because think about the difference between the affiliate level training and the games. It's eons apart. And we don't expect the average person to be carrying a 600-pound yoke. We just want them to get up, get a little sweaty, move, learn a few new things, and put on some muscle mass. That's it. It's the same thing with nutrition. I don't understand why he's like,
because he doesn't work with people on nutrition. He's the fitness guy. Like he started CrossFit. He understands the levels and getting to these different levels and doing these things. He knows people are not going to be able to go to the first day of CrossFit and kick up and start doing a handstand, right? And doing wall walks and handstand push-ups and muscle ups. Right. But he's asking people to do that on the nutrition side. That's what he's asking people to do. Exactly. He's asking people to be perfect with their nutrition.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Literally perfect. Like, hey, do everything perfect with your nutrition. But CrossFit, no. Go in, scale, learn from your coach, blah, 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 blah. You know, do it when you're ready, build strength over time, functionality.
Something's better than nothing, yeah.
You can't. So that's why his message is broken.
I have one question, and sorry, Joel, I know you're trying to wrap us up. I don't want to, this is a genuine question, and I think I'm going to get shit for this, and frankly, I don't care. I have genuine question. How is Greg like fit? Can Greg do the CrossFit, like what one might consider like the more advanced things? I'm not talking about.
Don't know. Don't think so, but maybe.
And like, shouldn't that be more common knowledge?
I mean, I think he's like in his 60s. I think,
okay.
And he grew up as a pretty high level gymnast. He had, if I'm remembering his story correctly, he had a complication from polio, I believe. That's why he kind of has that like kind of limp in his leg. But even with that, he was a very high level gymnast, as he would pronounce it.
Yeah.
And I think he still does CrossFit workouts. He just scales them like anybody else does.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. That's probably maybe why it inspired him to create CrossFit, because he realized the importance of movement. And now with his complication with polio, like not able to move in a similar way, but understands the importance of it. But yeah, I would be more curious if he actually eats any sugar at all.
That's what I was going to say. If he's scaling workouts because he's got X, Y, and Z and he's older and yada, yada, whatever, and we're all like, okay, great, that's cool. You can still be the leader without, leading necessarily by specific example. Then is he doing that with nutrition too? And if that's the case, is that cool? Like, is it cool for Hiller to say, don't ever eat sugar? Sugar is bad. Don't eat it. And then turn around and say, well, I eat it sometimes. Like, I'm only human. Like, I don't respect people that don't lead by example. And if your example is not what you're preaching, then preach something else.
Yeah, you got to talk about something different.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we need to wrap it up. We had a hard stop and we've already passed it. So
yeah.
So Justin's a busy guy, and Gab, you're busy too. So you guys got to get to your whatever you got to get to today. So just a couple reminders. Obviously, the YouTube standard, right? Like, subscribe, do all that stuff to help the channel. If you like this conversation, you want to hear more of these types of conversations moving forward, do all that stuff, help the channel out. And then also, if you are curious about, working with a nutrition coach, go to consistencybreedsgrowth.com. Go find them on Instagram. There's lots of ways that you can schedule a call at it's kind of like a free, kind of like what would you call it? An intake call or
consultation. Really give you some tips and stuff. And
and then there's all kinds of like free resources too that you can sign up for, that he's putting out, that Justin's putting out all the time. So follow Gab at gab.bolin on Instagram, right?
Yep.
And then obviously you can find, you should be able to find the Instagram in the comment or in the description. And so, hey, number one in the
Good
book.
job.
We did it, team.
We did it.
Talk soon.
All right, y'all. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll catch you next time.